The massive undertaking of Operation Overlord, the grand Allied plan to launch a full-scale invasion of German-occupied Western Europe, was set for the early summer of 1944. Its success was utterly dependent on unprecedented levels of planning, logistical coordination between the Allied nations, and maintaining absolute airtight secrecy, all culminating in the pivotal action of D-Day, June 6, 1944. The American contribution to this monumental assault was immense and focused primarily on the two westernmost landing zones, the smaller Utah Beach and the fiercely defended, crescent-shaped expanse of Omaha Beach. For the American GIs, many of whom had never seen large-scale combat, this was the ultimate terrifying test, representing the moment they would finally confront Hitler's formidable Atlantic Wall head-on. The psychological weight resting on these young men, carrying the hopes for the liberation of the continent, was truly immense and defining. The German military leadership was fully expecting a major invasion, but was successfully deceived and misplaced by Operation Fortitude, a massive and complex deception plan orchestrated by Allied intelligence. This plan led the Germans to believe, almost until the last moment, that the main Allied invasion force would strike the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel crossing, rather than the heavily mined beaches of Normandy. Consequently, crucial, powerful German formations, including the formidable 15th Army, were held in reserve in the wrong area for weeks, waiting for a phantom invasion. However, the German defences along the actual Normandy beaches, meticulously overseen by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, remained formidable. Massive concrete bunkers, elaborate minefields, lethal underwater obstacles, and interlocking fields of fire, all designed to inflict catastrophic casualties in the very first moments of the landing. The American invasion objectives were strategically split across the Cotentin Peninsula. The U.S. 4th Infantry Division was assigned Utah Beach, the westernmost landing zone, and the one generally considered less heavily defended than the others. The landing force was intended to be supported by specialized DD tanks, amphibious duplex-drive Shermans, launched close to the shore to provide immediate fire support. Crucially, due to strong tides and currents, the entire first wave of landing craft was pushed nearly 2,000 yards south of their intended landing zone, ironically placing them in a sector that was almost completely undefended. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., the assistant division commander, who famously went ashore with the first wave, declared with great confidence, "We'll start the war right here." The light and disorganized resistance led to a swift operational success, with casualties remaining remarkably low, only around 200 men killed or wounded. In stark, brutal, and tragic contrast to the success at Utah was the situation at Omaha Beach, a 5-mile crescent-shaped stretch of sand assigned to the U.S. 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions. Allied intelligence had tragically and fundamentally underestimated the strength of the defenses here. Crucially, the elite German 352nd Infantry Division, a battle-hardened and highly mobile formation, had moved into the sector just weeks before the invasion for anti-invasion exercises, undetected by Allied aerial and photographic reconnaissance. The beach itself was a perfect natural death trap, a wide, flat killing ground backed by steep, towering bluffs, giving the German defenders perfect elevation and clear, unobstructed fields of fire down onto the water, the beach, and the landing troops. The assault on Omaha Beach, which would forever earn the grim moniker Bloody Omaha, was a near catastrophe from the opening minutes. The heavy seas and strong currents caused most of the crucial supporting DD tanks, launched too far out, to sink miles offshore, drowning their crews and tragically denying the infantry their indispensable armored support. The planned pre-landing aerial and naval bombardment was rendered largely ineffective by poor visibility, low cloud cover, and inaccurate targeting that often overshot the concrete German fortifications, which remained largely intact and lethal. As the first waves of infantry hit the beach at 06:30, they met a perfect storm of coordinated fire from deadly machine guns, mortars, and artillery. Men were slaughtered in the shallow water and amongst the deadly beach obstacles, unable to advance or find effective cover. The casualties sustained on Omaha Beach were horrific and truly unprecedented for an invasion's first hour. Within terrifying minutes, the beach was choked with burning, destroyed vehicles, shattered, sinking landing craft, and the bodies of the fallen GIs. Many units were instantly reduced by half their strength, and command structures evaporated in the face of continuous fire. Numerous soldiers drowned, weighed down by their 80-plus pounds of heavy gear, while others became hopelessly pinned down behind the narrow, exposed shingle bank, unable to either move forward into the heavy fire zone or retreat back toward the deadly water. The air was thick with smoke, deafening noise, and the lethal spray of shrapnel. The overall situation on the beach was so desperate, confusing, and costly that Allied senior commanders, watching the carnage, seriously considered abandoning the landing altogether and diverting follow-on forces elsewhere. The critical turning point on Omaha was not dictated by a change in grand strategy, but emerged from the individual initiative, decentralized leadership, and raw, desperate courage of small, disorganized units and junior leaders. Groups of pinned-down rangers, combat engineers, and infantrymen, often under the hurried command of NCOs, sergeants, and lieutenants, who had lost all their senior officers, realized instinctively that remaining on the beach meant inevitable annihilation. They began to use specialized Bangalore torpedoes and various explosive charges to blast improvised, narrow gaps through the thick barbed wire and up the bluffs, often scaling the steep slopes and attacking the concrete German casemates one by one. This critical, localized shift from a stalled landing to aggressive, decentralized infiltration saved the entire operation. The U.S. Army Rangers played a uniquely crucial, high-risk role in securing the American beachheads. The 2nd Ranger Battalion, under the leadership of the tenacious Lieutenant Colonel James Rudder, was tasked with scaling the 100-foot sheer cliffs of Point du Hoc, located perilously between Omaha and Utah beaches. Their objective was to neutralize 6 massive German 155mm guns, which were believed capable of decimating the landing forces on both American beaches. Using specialized grappling hooks, ropes, and portable ladders, the Rangers assaulted the cliffs under intense German fire, suffering extremely heavy casualties. Though they initially found the heavy guns were missing from their emplacements, they quickly located them relocated nearby and successfully destroyed them, ensuring the safety of the entire Utah beach flank. Once the initial beach assaults were tenuously secured and the critical high ground overlooking the beaches was taken, by late afternoon on June 6th, the American focus immediately shifted to consolidating the beachhead and linking up the Allied forces. However, the American advance was severely and relentlessly hampered by the punishing, restrictive terrain of the bocage country of Normandy. This ancient landscape, characterized by dense, tangled hedgerows rising several feet high, often reinforced with deep earth and stone, effectively turned every single field into a defensible fortress, and every road into a deadly killing zone. The fighting here was terrifyingly claustrophobic, brutal, and often fought at pistol-point range, forcing troops into small-unit close-quarters combat. The German tactical strategy in the bocage, commanded by Field Marshal Rommel until his injury, was simple and effective: to contain the invasion and prevent any decisive Allied breakout at all costs. Rommel had deployed powerful, high-quality panzer divisions close to the coast for rapid counterattack. The American infantry found themselves immediately engaged in a relentless, grinding war of attrition against a determined, heavily armored foe fighting stubbornly from prepared, fortified positions. The fighting quickly devolved into hedgerow hell, where the American strategic advantage in overwhelming air power and massed artillery was significantly negated and reduced by the confined terrain and limited sight lines. The subsequent bloody battle for the key city of Carentan, located critically between Omaha and Utah beaches, was essential for the American link-up and the establishment of a continuous front. The 101st Airborne Division was again tasked with capturing this vital junction. The fighting was fierce, marked by brutal house-to-house combat in the urban wreckage and repeated fanatical German counterattacks from the elite Fallschirmjäger paratroopers. The eventual capture of Carentan, achieved by June 12th, was vital because it finally unified the disparate American beachheads and gave the Allies the continuous front line necessary to begin planning the breakout. The intense and sustained fighting in the bocage resulted in severe and immediate technical challenges for the American armor. The standard Sherman tanks were extremely vulnerable in this unique terrain. Tanks were forced to climb up and over the massive hedgerows, exposing their thinly armored bellies to direct fire from German anti-tank guns hidden on the other side. The quick, ingenious solution was a field modification. American Sergeant Curtis G. Cullen devised the Rhino tank modification, which involved welding sharp steel tusks, often cut from German beach obstacles, onto the front of the Shermans. These tusks cut cleanly through the dense hedges, allowing the tanks to stay low and dramatically improving infantry armor coordination and effectiveness. The massive, continuous influx of Allied men and material rapidly and irreversibly overwhelmed the Germans' limited ability to respond effectively or replace losses. The vast American logistical machine, famously known as the Red Ball Express, worked tirelessly to offload mountains of supplies onto the secured beaches and into the temporary Mulberry artificial harbors. Despite the savage fighting, the Americans ensured that the flow of food, fuel, and ammunition never faltered, cementing the overwhelming Allied advantage. For every single tank the Germans lost in the bocage, they struggled hopelessly to replace it. For every tank the Americans lost, 3 more arrived shortly after to take its place. The immediate American strategic goal after the D-Day landings was the capture of the crucial deep-water port of Cherbourg, located at the northern tip of the Cotentin Peninsula. This was absolutely essential for sustaining the massive invasion force over the long term. The U.S. 7th Corps fought a bloody, month-long battle through the entire peninsula to achieve this objective. The determined German garrison defended the port fiercely, deliberately sabotaging the entire harbor facility and heavily mining the docks. Cherbourg was captured by the end of June, but it took weeks of intense, dangerous effort by naval engineers and demolition teams to clear the damage and make the port fully operational for large-scale supply use. The constant, overwhelming close air support provided by the U.S. 9th Air Force was an invaluable asset in the confined, deadly terrain of the bocage. Pilots provided cab-rank support, meaning squadrons were constantly available and airborne, ready to be called in to immediately strike German strongpoints or counter-attacking armored formations. The German soldiers became so terrified of the relentless, low-flying Allied fighter bombers, which they nicknamed Jabos, Jägerbomber, that their movement was virtually restricted to nighttime. The overwhelming Allied air superiority effectively prevented any large, coordinated German maneuver that could have successfully broken the American beachhead. The American soldiers faced a psychologically draining, formidable adversary in the German defenders. The Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, and the Waffen-SS units were among Hitler's most disciplined, battle-hardened, and fanatical forces. Unlike the exhausted infantry of the Eastern Front, these elite soldiers fought with extreme tenacity, often defending every hedgerow and every ruined village, literally to the last man. This intense, unrelenting resistance contributed significantly to the high American casualty rate and the prolonged, agonizing nature of the fighting throughout the initial weeks of the campaign. One of the less recognized but crucial challenges was the enormous and unsustainable casualty rate among the American medical and engineering corps. Medics and corpsmen had to operate under continuous, direct fire on the beaches and in the dense confines of the bocage, suffering extremely heavy losses while treating the wounded. Likewise, the combat engineers were absolutely indispensable. They were the first men ashore on D-Day, tasked with clearing mines and obstacles under the most intense fire imaginable, and suffered the highest casualty rate of any single occupational group on the lethal sands of Omaha Beach. Their ultimate sacrifice cleared the necessary path for the infantry to finally move inland. The intense and destructive fighting, particularly around the key city of St. Lo in mid-July, became the final brutal choke point that had to be overcome before the long-anticipated American breakout could begin. The city was a vital transportation hub, and its capture was critical for launching the next phase of the offensive. The prolonged, destructive battle to seize St. Lo turned the city into a field of complete rubble and debris. This relentless, grinding, attritional warfare confirmed that the German forces would not yield territory easily, ultimately forcing the Americans to plan an entirely new, radical offensive approach to break the deadlock. General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. First Army, recognized that the costly frontal attack strategy in the bocage was becoming prohibitively expensive in terms of casualties and time. He conceived and developed Operation Cobra, a massive, highly concentrated air-ground offensive designed to blast a catastrophic hole through the German lines southwest of St. Lo. The radical plan called for an overwhelming carpet bombing run by thousands of heavy bombers to completely neutralize a narrow sector of the German line, followed immediately by a rapid, concentrated armored thrust. This was a radical and highly risky departure from established combined arms doctrine. Operation Cobra was launched on July 25th, an operation marred by tragedy. The initial aerial bombardment, tragically, fell devastatingly short of its target, causing significant friendly fire casualties, including the death of Lieutenant General Leslie J. McNair, a top American commander observing the assault. Despite this tragic setback and loss, the sheer, unprecedented scale of the bombardment successfully shattered the German morale, cohesion, and communications in the target zone. When American armor, led by the newly activated General Patton's U.S. Third Army, poured through the shattered German lines, the result was a decisive, irreversible breakthrough that stunned the German High Command. The immediate, spectacular success of Operation Cobra led directly to the rapid and decisive breakout from Normandy. General Patton's Third Army, now freed from the crippling constraints of the bocage, began a lightning sweep across the relatively open ground toward the east and south. This rapid, mobile, armored advance was the complete opposite of the grinding, close-quarters hedgerow fighting. The swift movement allowed the Americans and their allies to rapidly encircle the main body of the German forces in the increasingly tight Falaise pocket, marking the absolute, ultimate collapse of the German military position in France. The entire Battle of Normandy for the American forces lasted nearly 2 months and involved an unparalleled commitment of raw courage and national resources. The cost of securing the vital beachhead and breaking out was staggering. Over 125,147 American casualties, tragically including 20,138 soldiers killed. This brutal price was paid for the approximately 50-mile gain of the beachhead into France. The initial disastrous failure at Omaha and the subsequent costly grinding fight in the bocage meant that the American experience in Normandy was defined by a unique combination of extreme initial danger and prolonged bloody attrition. The overwhelming use of massed American artillery was a defining and decisive characteristic of the entire Normandy campaign. Fire direction centers, utilizing new, accurate mathematical calculations, could coordinate devastating barrages from hundreds of guns, quickly shifting massive suppressive fire onto German counterattacks or defensive strongpoints. The sheer weight of Allied shells delivered often acted as the decisive countermeasure in the restrictive bocage, often breaking German attacks and shattering their will before they could even close with American infantry positions. The overwhelming artillery superiority was a direct, palpable extension of America's unmatchable industrial might. The D-Day landings and the subsequent Battle of Normandy represented the ultimate trial by fire for the American citizen soldier. Thrust into a fight that was instantly more vicious and costly than expected, Omaha, and then dragged through a prolonged, agonizing war of attrition, bocage, the American forces demonstrated the crucial ability to quickly adapt, innovate, such as the Rhino tank, and persevere through decentralized initiative when high command was paralyzed or supply lines were stretched. Their tenacious commitment secured the vital beachhead and guaranteed the eventual final destruction of the German army in the West. The strategic and enduring triumph of the Normandy campaign was the successful establishment of a permanent, massive, and secure foothold on the European continent. By August 1944, the German army in France was shattered and in full retreat. The American soldiers who bravely stormed the beaches, desperately crawled through the sand under fire, and brutally fought hedgerow by hedgerow, secured the necessary indispensable base for the final drive to Berlin, ensuring the ultimate end of the war in Europe less than a year later.